The Industrial Revolution was a transformative period of intense technological, economic, and social change that began in Britain in the late 18th century. Believe it or not, work life was starkly different before. Children as young as 4 can start in coal mines during the Industrial Revolution. But now we have policies to sanction that practice, and our working conditions look almost unrecognizable today. It's important to go back in history and look at what's been accomplished since then and at how the UK transformed because of the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, Britain was largely a rural, agricultural society. The lifestyle and living conditions were centered around small villages or rural settlements, with limited travel beyond local areas due to the lack of roads and public transportation. Life revolved around farming and the local community, with people relying on themselves and their neighbors for basic needs like food and clothing. Living conditions were often basic, characterized by poor sanitation and limited access to medical care, making diseases that are easily treatable today potentially deadly. Education was limited, primarily accessible only to the wealthy who could afford private tutors and schooling. Politics and power were concentrated around land ownership and military honors, leaving ordinary people with few rights. In terms of technology and work, the main sources of power were manual labor or the use of animals, along with water wheels. There were no steam engines, factories, or mass production. Most goods were produced locally using simple tools and techniques within a cottage industry or domestic system, with people working from their homes. Farm work was very labor-intensive, relying on manual tools and seasonal cycles, with little mechanization or automation. Employment was often seasonal, leading to struggles in finding work during the winter months when agricultural activities were minimal. The Industrial Revolution marked a significant turning point in history, revolutionizing the global economy. It shifted the foundation from an agrarian and handicraft-based system to one dominated by industry, machine manufacturing, and mechanized production. This transformation began in Great Britain in the mid-18th century and expanded to Europe and the United States by the early 19th century. Key technological innovations and developments defined the Industrial Revolution. The increased use of iron and steel in manufacturing introduced new materials, while the adoption of coal, steam power, electricity, and internal combustion engines provided new energy sources. Inventions such as the spinning jenny, power loom, and steam engine significantly boosted productivity, leading to the creation of new machines. The factory system centralized work into organized factories with a division of labor, and advancements in transportation and communication, such as railroads, steamships, telegraphs, and radios, facilitated trade and information exchange. Additionally, the application of scientific discoveries to industry became increasingly practical. These changes resulted in a massive increase in industrial output, wealth creation, and improved living standards for some. However, the transition also caused significant social change. The growth of cities, the rise of the working class, and shifts in authority patterns marked this period of transformation. Historians generally agree that the Industrial Revolution began in Britain due to several factors, including abundant natural resources, an entrepreneurial boom, and a growing colonial empire. By the 19th century, the revolution had spread to other parts of Europe and North America, further extending its transformative impact. But how did the Industrial Revolution change the UK? The Industrial Revolution brought about the rise of the factory system, which became the dominant mode of production, replacing the earlier cottage industry model. Factories were large, purpose-built facilities that utilized mechanized production methods. These factories represented a significant departure from the small-scale, home-based production that characterized the cottage industry. They were designed to house a large number of machines and workers, allowing for mass production of goods on an unprecedented scale. Key features of the factory system included the division of labor into specialized tasks, which increased efficiency and output. Factories and the machines they housed started producing items more quickly and cheaply than handmade methods could achieve. With the increase in supply, consumer prices dropped. Items such as shoes, clothing, household goods, and tools, which improve quality of life, became more accessible and affordable. Additionally, foreign markets emerged for these products, shifting the balance of trade in favor of the producers. This shift brought increased wealth to the manufacturing companies and added tax revenue to government coffers. However, it also widened the wealth gap between goods-producing and goods-consuming countries. As factories grew in urban areas, there was a notable migration of people from rural regions to cities in search of employment opportunities, spurring urbanization. This movement led to the development of new infrastructure, such as roads, railroads, and housing, which facilitated the expansion of cities and towns. The influx of people and the subsequent urban growth transformed both the physical and social landscapes, creating vibrant urban centers. Initially, many areas faced housing shortages, leading to the emergence of cramped shantytowns composed of shacks and substandard housing. As the population surged, local sewerage and sanitation systems became overwhelmed, and drinking water often became contaminated. The close proximity of people, combined with exhaustion from poor working conditions and unsafe water, created ideal conditions for outbreaks of diseases like typhus, cholera, smallpox, and tuberculosis. The necessity to address these health crises in urban areas prompted medical advances and the establishment of modern building regulations, health laws, and urban planning in many industrialized cities. Eventually, these efforts led to construction booms and the development of more modern buildings. Additionally, the Industrial Revolution led to a dramatic increase in production and exports, particularly for Britain. The country's GDP per capita and standard of living began to rise, though the benefits of industrialization were unequally distributed among the population. Despite this inequality, the overall economic growth was significant, establishing Britain as the workshop of the world. This period of industrial dominance was a key factor in Britain's emergence as a global economic and political power. The ability to produce goods on a large scale and trade them internationally not only strengthened Britain's economy, but also extended its influence worldwide. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, the gleaming promise of economic growth and technological innovation was shadowed by the grim reality of working conditions within factories. What is the dark side of the working conditions during the Industrial Revolution, and how did they change? During the Industrial Revolution, long working hours became a defining feature of factory life, with workers typically enduring shifts that lasted between 12 and 14 hours a day. These extended workdays were the norm in many factories, where the relentless drive for productivity and efficiency meant that labor was a constant, torturous endeavor. Workers were often expected to arrive at the factory early in the morning and stay until late in the evening, with only brief breaks for meals and rest. During these meal times, workers frequently found themselves responsible for cleaning their machines, which added to the already demanding schedule. Discipline in the factory is strict and cruel. Minor mistakes can lead to punishment, such as being hit with a leather strap or enduring other forms of abuse, like having iron weights hung around their necks or being doused in cold water. Workers also face harsh fines for talking, whistling, or even having a little dirt on their machines. Some employers even tamper with the clocks to make workers late so they can impose fines. Journalist John Spargo, who visited the mines when the death calendar became a thing in the early 1900s, said, "The coal is hard, and accidents to the hands, such as a cut, broken, or crushed fingers, are common among the boys. Sometimes there is a worse accident. A terrified shriek is heard, and a boy is mangled and torn in the machinery, or disappears in the chute to be picked up later, smothered and dead. Clouds of dust fill the breakers and are inhaled by the boys, laying the foundations for asthma and miners' consumption." In the mines, he encountered boys as young as 10 years old, working in harsh conditions. Investigator Marie Van Norst, when visiting a cotton mill, said, "The air of the room is white with cotton, although the spool room is perhaps the freest. These little particles are breathed into the nose, drawn into the lungs. Lung disease and pneumonia, consumption, are the constant, never-absent scourge of the mill village. The girls expectorate to such an extent that the floor is nauseous with it." But change eventually dawned upon the factories and mills. In 1802, Sir Robert Peel introduced the Health and Morals of Apprentices Act, often considered the first attempt to regulate working conditions in the UK. This act aimed to improve conditions in cotton textile mills by requiring cleanliness, adequate ventilation, suitable accommodation, and limiting work hours to 12 per day. It also mandated that apprentices receive basic education and religious instruction. However, the act failed to achieve its goals due to ineffective enforcement and a flawed system where local visitors, often mill owners themselves, were reluctant to enforce the regulations. Despite later efforts to strengthen the legislation, such as those in 1819, 1825, and 1831, the Act's impact was minimal, revealing the need for more effective reforms. Between 1844 and 1847, there was intense debate over reducing the maximum working hours for women and young people in textile factories, a cause championed by the 10-hour movement since the early 1830s. In 1847, Parliament passed a law establishing a 10-hour workday, but the poorly drafted legislation created enforcement challenges. Many mill owners circumvented the law by using complex relay systems to extend the working hours of men while only adhering to the 10-hour limit for women and children. The 10-Hour Act of 1850 clarified the regulations and addressed some of these loopholes, by which time resistance to the working hour restrictions had lessened. The lack of effective labor laws meant that workers endured grueling schedules, unsafe conditions, and abusive discipline with little recourse for improvement. Despite early legislative attempts to address these issues, such as the Health and Morals of Apprentices Act and the 10-Hour Act, significant reforms were slow to come, and many workers continued to suffer. It was not until the latter part of the 19th century that more comprehensive labor laws began to take shape, laying the groundwork for future advancements in workers' rights and working conditions. Today, the rise of AI-generated art has sparked protests from artists and creative professionals that echo the resistance faced by workers during the Industrial Revolution. Just as 19th century artisans resisted the mechanization of textile production that threatened their livelihoods, contemporary artists are challenging the impact of AI technology on their craft and careers. The problems in the past are just the same in the present, shown in the case of the Luddites. The term Luddite is commonly used today to describe people who oppose new technology, but its origins are rooted in a labor movement from the early 19th century. The original Luddites were British weavers and textile workers who resisted the rise of mechanized looms and knitting frames, which they felt threatened their skilled trades. These artisans, who had spent years perfecting their craft, feared that the unskilled workers operating these new machines were jeopardizing their jobs and livelihoods. During the economic strain of the Napoleonic Wars, the competition from cheap factory-produced textiles pushed some of these weavers to break into factories and destroy the machinery. They adopted the name Luddites from a figure named Ned Ludd, a young apprentice who was said to have vandalized a textile machine in 1779. The Luddite movement began in Nottingham in 1811 and quickly spread across the country, particularly to the West Riding of Yorkshire and Lancashire in 1812, as well as to Leicestershire and Derbyshire. In Yorkshire, the Luddites sought to dismantle new machinery that they believed was leading to job losses among skilled workers. Hand loom weavers opposed the introduction of power looms, which they saw as a threat to their traditional livelihoods. In Nottinghamshire, their protests focused on wage cuts. The Luddites responded to these grievances by sending threatening letters to employers, breaking into factories to destroy new machines like the wide weaving frames, and attacking employers, magistrates, and food merchants. Their actions led to violent confrontations with government soldiers who were deployed to suppress the unrest. The newspaper reported that 900 lace frames have been broken. In response to the destruction, the government stationed 6 regiments of soldiers in the town, turning the conflict into a protracted civil war of factory owners, backed by the state, against the workers. The article took a grim tone, declaring, "God only knows what will be the end of it, nothing but ruin." As the Luddites watched massive factory buildings replace their rural towns, they saw the shift of labor from home-based work or small workshops to centralized factory settings. Just as the collective action of workers in the 19th century brought about improvements, contemporary debates around AI could lead to new regulations and practices that balance technological advancement with fair labor practices and ethical considerations. By learning from history, there is hope that today's efforts to address the consequences of AI might also result in a future where technology serves humanity in a more equitable and just manner. Before World War I, people relied on their local communities for food and resources, with agriculture being the primary occupation for many. However, after the war, the scarcity of resources highlighted the need for more reliable food security, leading to the creation of international organizations that played a major role in addressing food shortages and promoting global food security. The post-war era saw the rise of organizations like the Save the Children Fund, which was established in 1919 to alleviate starvation, and the League of Nations Health Organization, which focused on nutrition and health standards. This shift from local self-reliance to dependence on larger institutions for food and stability was influenced by the Industrial Revolution, which had already transformed agriculture and manufacturing. The advent of new machinery, the expansion of factories, and the decline of traditional jobs permanently transformed working life in both rural and urban areas. Innovations in transportation and communication made the post-industrial world more dynamic and interconnected than ever before. This period saw a rise in the affordability of consumer goods and an increase in job opportunities to meet the needs of a growing population. However, the costs of this progress were evident in the harsh realities of work, which often involved noisy, repetitive, and dangerous conditions. Additionally, as cities expanded, they became overcrowded, polluted, and plagued by crime. Despite the disruption to traditional industries, mechanization actually created many more jobs than it eliminated. By 1830, 1 in every 80 Britons was employed in over 4,000 textile mills across the country. However, these new jobs were quite different from the ones people had before. Factory workers were often required to perform repetitive tasks under strict time schedules, whereas previous workers were typically paid per project and worked at their own pace. In the new factory system, workers specialized in just one task, among many in a larger production process. On the positive side, factory jobs provided regular, consistent pay, which was a significant improvement for many, especially for seasonal agricultural workers who previously faced unstable income. Britain's population surged from 6 million in 1750 to 21 million by 1851. The 1851 census marked a significant shift, revealing that for the first time, more people lived in towns and cities than in rural areas. During the 19th century, cities like Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, and Halifax saw their populations grow tenfold. This urbanization led to more opportunities for young people to meet and marry earlier, resulting in a higher birth rate compared to the rural communities of the past. The Industrial Revolution, a period of profound transformation, brought both significant benefits and notable drawbacks that forever changed the world. These advancements came at a steep price. The rapid industrialization led to harsh working conditions, with long hours, low wages, and unsafe environments becoming the norm for factory workers. Urban areas grew overcrowded and polluted, creating new social and environmental challenges. Despite these issues, the Industrial Revolution laid the groundwork for the modern world. shaping economies, societies, and technologies in ways that continue to influence our lives today. Thanks for watching.